It all started in 1950, where this guy right here, his name is Alan Turing, proposes something called the imitation game to test to see if machines can exhibit human-like intelligence. And this would ultimately turn into the Turing test. And so one of the big things later on in the 2020s and things like that, and even right now, so when we're talking about 2025 as I record this, one of the big tests has been the Turing test. Can a machine, when you talk to an AI, does it feel like you're talking to a human being? Can a machine exhibit the intelligence that a human being has access to? And ultimately, as we proceed forward with the advancement of AI technology, this will be one of those key markers, one of those key tests as to whether or not AI really truly is evolving to the point that it can do and think like a human being. So the impact of Alan Turing, among very many other things, was this initial thought process behind whether or not AI can actually exhibit human-like intelligence, and this was the seed that went and expanded onto everything else that we see today. This does not mean that he actually was a part of the development of the initial technologies. Unfortunately, as you'll find in a couple of slides, he passed away before the first major team was even developed. It's just that he was the reason why the concept of this was seeded, why the initial thoughts around this were even started. A computer in the 1950s, just to kind of give you an idea of what we were comparing it all to. This is going to be really fun as we go through the years and through the decades. This is what a computer in the 1950s looked like. So this specific one that we're looking at, this is called Bark, and this is Connie Palm, the guy that's sitting on the computer. And this is like the best image I could find, because a lot of the images were just really, they were not very impressive. And Bark was the very first computer, right? Or I don't want to say it was the very first computer, but it was the most complex and most advanced computer in 1950. In 1954, unfortunately, Mr. Turing passed away. And the reason behind it is that it was cyanide poisoning, and there was a lot of speculation around the fact that it was suicide. He committed suicide with cyanide poisoning. And the reason behind that was he was convicted of homosexuality, and they really bullied him, and they put him through a lot of torment and agony because I guess he was gay. I'm not exactly sure. I think he was, but it's not really a reason, especially when you think about it these days. It has nothing to do with somebody's intelligence level. It has nothing to do with their capabilities. If they're a genius, and this guy certainly was, because he founded the idea behind whether or not AI could even exist. If you're a genius, you're a genius. It shouldn't matter anything else. And so he was just, unfortunately, it was a very rough time for humanity, and it was a tough time for people who may or may not have been homosexuals, and that was kind of the reason why he killed himself. If you want access to my notes and exclusive downloads, and to get lifetime access to me on Discord, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers. We have the supporter, the agent, the guardian, and the master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The agent, guardian, and master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, and you will be able to choose the tier for which you want to join. I really hope I see you in the Discord chats. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section. Our next milestone in history was in 1956, and this is the inception of the Dartmouth Conference, or I guess it was more of like a summer workshop, a meeting that took place. And these guys were all in that meeting, and they're coined as the founding fathers of AI. But again, by this time, Alan Turing had passed away, so surely he would have definitely been on this list. And so we have the John McCarthy, Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon, Ray Solomonoff, Alan Newell, Herbert Simon, Arthur Samuel, Oliver Selfridge, Nathaniel Rochester, and Trenchard Moore. And Trenchard Moore looks like, a business guy. I feel like this guy probably was one of like the funding people over there. And then you have the mad scientist looking guy right here, the the Ray Solomonovs of the world. So this was definitely one of the guys that you can, I think, like he was one of the engineers, you know what I mean? He looks like he was an engineer. These guys look like they were investors that were involved, and that's kind of my view on it. I have not done deeper research into each one of these characters, so please feel free to do some research and drop it in the comments if it's interesting to you. But this was the crew, right? This was definitely the crew, and they are considered the founding fathers of AI. I personally think Alan Turing is that person, but I believe these people were actually the ones who started developing the research field and the technologies and things like that. So we had the term artificial intelligence was coined by these crew at a summer workshop, and they were promising that humans can solve human level problems, or I'm sorry, machines can solve human level problems. So this was their initial pitch and their initial theory and philosophy that they presented. And the impact of all of this was that the official birth of AI took place as a field of research. So this is when it all really started and funding began, and a lot of different, I would say, campaigns were started after this. The technology definitely was not anywhere near what was needed to actually make these things happen, but this is where it all really started. So a computer in 1956 that we have right here, it's this guy right here. This is the, I want to say it's the Bendix G15. We can kind of see it on this little element right here. This actually kind of looks a little bit cooler than the first one that we saw, mainly because it's in color. So this still is not the most advanced computer by far. This was considered the first mini computer, if you can believe it. And this is... these pictures I just geek out on these pictures because they're clearly gigantic boxes that have very limited computing power compared to your phone. Like the weakest smartphone that you can have in your hand right now is significantly more powerful than what this thing is and what it could have done. Our next key milestone happened between the years of 1974 and 1980, and this was coined as the first AI winter. So funding dried up, right? During this time, whoever the investors were and whoever the companies were, they stopped providing funding. And the main reason behind it was there were just so many overhyped promises, so many large promises that were made, and not a lot of progress was made. So they gave overhyped promises. They had limited power in their computing process and in their abilities, and because of that, funding kind of dried up. They're like, yeah, you guys don't know what the heck you're talking about. You're just wasting our money. And that's basically it. So the progress of the field was slowed down. But one of the key things that were developed here, or the mindsets, we should say, is that realism, as far as what can we do in the amount of time and how much can we actually deliver to our investors. This was one of the key concepts that came out of the first AI winter. And obviously that's kind of foreshadowing a little bit because there was another AI winter that took place as well. And the AI winter is simply, it dried up, right? It froze. The funding froze. They weren't able to proceed and move forward. The computers between 1974 and 1980 are actually quite interesting. During this short period of time, there was a significant amount of progress, I think, that was made. So this was the one in, I think I want to say 1974 is the time for this specific computer that's been attached to it. It's called the MCM70, and as you can see right here, the data was stored essentially on cassette tapes, if you can believe it. This was in 1974. And then we have this one right here, which is the Olivetti P6060, and this was developed in 1975. And we have this one right here, which is actually very, very interesting. This is the first resemblance of a laptop computer, as you can see right here. This is called the Micro One, and the first single board computer that was brought up, and this happened in 1975. And then we had the Apple One, very, very pivotal moment in computer technology. And as you can see, it's actually kind of really interesting because the Apple One was mostly this board that you can see right here. And there were several attachments that could be made to it, including a monitor, for example. But this was the big thing. This was the big development that was done by Apple One, or for the Apple One. This was kind of the really big development right here. And if you've ever seen the Steve Jobs movie with Ashton Kutcher, Steve Wozniak was the guy who really developed the tech behind it, and Steve Jobs was the one that got distribution and sold it. At least that's what the kind of stories tell us. And he was kind of the design element of Apple, and Steve Wozniak was the technical genius that was able to develop these types of things. And the microprocessors that he was able to develop cost like literally $1 compared to maybe hundreds of dollars from Intel or other computers. So Apple One was developed in 1976, and then we have this guy right here, which is Apple II, which was developed in 1977. And that was the most powerful at the time. That was like the biggest progress that was made when computing itself was concerned. The next milestone that we have happened between 1987 to 1993, and this was the second AI winter. And funding dried up again, mainly because expert systems failed to actually deliver globally, right? Another drought of funding because they couldn't deliver, right? So the impact here was that they shifted their focus to applications, the actual applications within the machines themselves and the applications of the uses of these machines. Again, this was not this is what this kind of actually very interesting, because the concept of AI, like the thought, the seed of AI, was developed in 1950, and it took them decades for them to even be able to provide the computing power to actually make any of it work. And then you'll see it was more in the relative recent years and decades that you can even have a first resemblance of what that initial thought of AI was. So it took them several decades for them to even be able to develop the computing power and to actually do a lot of the things that what we see right now with the GPTs and the Grok AIs and the Google Geminis. These just are light years ahead. And it's very amazing that, since the inception of the thought, which is in 1950, since the inception of that thought, 70 years later, there's been so much progress that has been made. And it's a very big curve that happened over the last 10 years with the actual power of these AI tools compared to the 60 years prior to that, where barely any progress was being made. It's just very, very interesting to see. The next milestone is actually the first real milestone that took place that we can consider that, okay, there's some progress that's actually being made. And this happened in 1997. So really, when you think about it, right, 1950 was when the initial thought was founded. And then we go forward 47 years, and the first official kind of semblance of AI and what it can actually do comes out in 1997. And the milestone here was Deep Blue. This was a computer that was developed by IBM. Deep Blue beats Kasparov, and Gary Kasparov, was the chess champion. He was a world champion of chess, and a computer beat him. So what you can see is that the gentleman that's sitting on the right-hand side right here, he's basically inputting the moves that are being made on the board into the computer, and the computer is saying, okay, do this next move. So the computer itself isn't really playing, right? Or there is a human that's still interacting, interfacing with the computer and doing all the moves that takes place. But ultimately what happened was the most historic chess game, at least as far as technology itself is concerned, the most historic chess game took place in 1997. The computer beats the champion, Gary Kasparov, and this impact was that AI can outperform humans in rule-based games. So the rule element of it is very, very important, because this is still a very, you can call it a black and white kind of an interaction, where it's like there's a certain number of rules, right? There's a certain number of moves that can take place on a chessboard. There's a certain number of patterns. If you play out all of the patterns that would potentially exist on a chessboard, there's essentially a limited number of moves and strategies and tactics that can take place. even if you account for every single variation of openings and closings and mid-game and end-game, if you account for all of them and you count all of them, I'm sure it's in the millions. However, it's still limited. So a computer can ingest all of those rules, all of those variations and patterns, and then play based on that. So this proved that in a rule-based environment, the computer can outperform a human being. And then we jump forward approximately another decade. So what is that, 15 years, something like that? So we jump forward 14 years, and we now have another IBM development called Watson that beats these humans at Jeopardy. And so this happened in 2011, and as you can see, the scoreboard is quite astounding. So, 77,000 versus 24 and 21,000. And so the concept here is that IBM's Watson wins Jeopardy, and this proves that understanding natural language trivia was the key development here. So it crushes the humans because it can now understand natural language trivia. And the impact here was that the potential of AI with unstructured data. So the last thing that we saw was that there was rules, right? It was structured data and different moves to be made. Now we have unstructured data and the processing, the ingestion of that data so that it can actually understand what's going on and then go ahead and give a response. Now, there's another concept here is that, okay, well, you know what, there's however many questions, let's say there's 1 million questions, right? I have no idea how many questions are inside of Jeopardy, but let's say there are 1 million questions. So you feed all those questions to this computer. So now the computer has the answers to all of the questions. And so if that's the case, then all it needs to do is just understand the question that is being asked. So it's more about the ability for the computer to actually listen to a human being speak, process what is being said, and that would be considered what? Natural language trivia, technically. Process what's being said and then go inside of its database and pull the response. And as long as that process is done seamlessly, then it can pull the appropriate response. And then, of course, it can go ahead and beat a human being, right? So because it has all the answers, essentially. That's what it is, right? So this was the key development that happened in 2011, where IBM's computer, so IBM, there is a reason why they have such a big name and they're so well known, is that they have some really big wins on their tool belt. They have, or not their tool belt, they have a couple of notches on their belt, like successes on their belt. That's probably what I'm looking for. So that was what happened in 2011. And then as you see, as we move forward here, the time span, the jump from one development to the next development is now shorter and shorter and shorter. So this is probably one of the longer ones that we went from 1997 to 2011, and that is technically 14 years. And so in that 14-year period, there were two big things. The first one was IBM at chess. The second one was IBM at Jeopardy. And now as we move forward, the time span between each development just keeps getting shorter and shorter. The next big success actually happens in 2016, but right before 2016, there is something else that is very noteworthy that we do need to address. In 2015, OpenAI was founded. And OpenAI was founded by these gentlemen right here. So the most notable person here is Elon Musk, and he was one of the original co-founders of OpenAI. That happened in 2015. The organization was founded in San Francisco by Sam Altman, Reid Hoffman, Jessica Livingston, Elon Musk, Ilya Sutskever, Peter Thiel, and others, who collectively pledged $1 billion. Musk resigned from the board in 2018, but remained a donor and eventually committed to $100 million of development. But as you know, hindsight is 2020, because now we know that Elon Musk is not a fan of OpenAI. The original concept that he had in mind to actually have open source AI is no longer the case with OpenAI. They're actually a very big for-profit company, and a lot of the original goals that Elon Musk had when he was a part of this team no longer is applicable. Therefore, he's not a fan of OpenAI. And so he started his own AI called Grok AI. This was after he bought X, or Twitter, and then turned it into X. So a lot of that is now hindsight. You can see all of those things just kind of clearly in history. But at the time, these guys were really chummy, and Elon Musk was actually a fan of Sam Altman. So the nonprofit research lab was what the purpose of OpenAI was, which is the name itself is implying open source AI, and that's something that Elon did come up with. And so this was meant to be a nonprofit research lab. Their first major development was GPT-1 that actually came out in 2018, and the impact from this group and from this company is that the world of tech would quite literally never be the same, because as we find out with ChatGPT in a few years, as we find out with ChatGPT, the world changed with ChatGPT. I'm sure you remember your very first time interacting with GPT if you're watching this, and it's just mind-blowing. And especially if you are a little bit older like me, right? I don't know. I guess I do consider myself to be older, because in the world of AI or in the world of technology, I've seen a lot of technical development come from analog and from the rotary phones when I was a kid and all of that stuff. And my very first interaction with ChatGPT was, for me, it was like, it was crazy to actually go through that experience. And I remember it very vividly. And it was life-changing. It was transformative. And I think anybody else who has dealt with it will tell you the same thing. So then we can actually go into looking at what development that happened in 2016 officially, which was when AlphaGo, which was another computer, defeated the Go champion in 2016. So AlphaGo was developed by DeepMind, and this was an AI tool that beat Lee Sedol in Go, which is a game that requires intuition, right? So this is now less about rules and it's more about intuitive thinking. And so this was one of the really major developments when it came down to the competition between a human being and an AI tool. So the breakthrough or the impact here was that there was a big breakthrough in reinforcement learning, where, as things happen, the computer is now adjusting its strategy and tactic, and it's a very big this was kind of like a really big pinnacle in development. And when it happened, a couple of my friends and I actually did start just talking about it and just kind of geeking out over how crazy this actually is. So this was at the time I was very present mentally, and I was like, wow, this is actually kind of crazy that this is happening, because we did hear about the chess with Kasparov and the Jeopardy thing, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. But when you know how difficult Go is, it's not really the easiest game. It's like chess is easier than Go, right? Because it's rule based, right? Go requires intuitive thinking, intuition, and things like that. So that was kind of the big thing, where it's like, wow, this is actually kind of crazy. It's kind of getting a little bit crazy. And so the last one we had was 2011, right? And then 2015 was GPT and OpenAI, and now we're at 2016. So you can see that the timeline is getting shorter and shorter. So technically, it was 2011 to 2016 were the two major milestones, and our next one is going to be in 2018. And in 2018, BERT revolutionized the natural language processing. I believe that's what that stands for. It's not neurolinguistic programming, it's just language processing. So BERT was a computer that was developed by Google. I have no idea if this is the logo for BERT. I couldn't find like a proper logo for BERT, or I couldn't find any kind of image that really would resemble it. But I thought this was funny when I pulled it up when I went through the image search and I found this. I was like, this is actually kind of hilarious that they did this. So if you don't know who that is, that's Bert from Sesame Street, I want to say. So there was a big leap in contextual language, and this is 2018. So remember, the last one was 2016, where AlphaGo defeats the Go champion, and that's where reinforcement thinking and intuition and all of those things actually come about. And in 2018, 2 years later, BERT comes out, which is the improvement of contextual language understanding. So this was a big leap in the understanding of contextual language. And bidirectional processing, meaning that it would look at the word, like let's say you give it a sentence of 5 words, it would look at the word after the first word and then it will look at the first word and the third word to understand what the second word really was trying to do, and then it will look at the second word and the fourth word between the third word. And so it was looking at both directions of the sentence instead of just looking at one direction moving forward. It was looking at both directions to process the full context of the sentence that was being fed into it and to interact with the human being that was at the helm, so to speak. So this was very, very big. This was very important, and this was a leap in contextual language understanding. And so the impact here was that the search engines and chatbots that were being developed at the time and moving forward from that moment on were all enhanced, and they were all much more powerful, and they delivered much better results to us, and our interaction with them was significantly better as we started interacting further and further with the technologies in our lives. So this happened in 2018, right? So the last one was 2016, and then now we've just jumped 2 years ahead, and now we're in 2018. And of course, we're going to jump a little bit into the future again, and we're going to actually be introduced to GPT-1, which was the very first GPT. This was not necessarily public yet. It was just the language model itself, the large language model itself, and its ability to do what it does. And it had 117 million parameters that it actually featured. And this was the predecessor of the modern world of AI as we know it right now. This was essentially the one that kind of set the stage of the language processing tools and our ability to chat with them and our ability to get the type of interaction that we can from them. And this again was the first major development of OpenAI that happened in 2018, and this was GPT-1. So not ChatGPT-1, but just the first version of GPT as a language model. The next one happened in 2020, so just a couple of years ahead. And in 2020, we had GPT-3, which eventually was the source of ChatGPT, and as well as generative AI. So the concept of just you say something and then it generates imagery for you. The public version of GPT was actually available now in beta mode via the access to their API. There were very many tools. There were like several tools that really came out that actually generated human-like responses from the prompts that were given, as well as the creative AI applications that came out, which again were generative AI. So they would either generate responses for you or they would generate images for you. And if you messed around with any of these things in 2020, you should remember how quickly they started progressing and the quality of the images that came out in 2020 versus the quality of the images that came out in 2021 and 2022, and fast forward to right now, 2025, and then probably by the time in 2026, and the estimation is that by 2030, it's going to be so good, the images and the videos and everything that are generated are going to be so good that you will not be able to differentiate whether or not it was footage that was captured with a video camera or if it was something that was just generated with an AI tool. So this was the first official boom of the generative AI world where GPT-3 came out. You can now start chatting with ChatGPT and you can start going into a lot of different things. Again, this was not fully public in the sense that you can just go to chat.openai.com and anybody could access it. It was still in beta and you still had to access it via their API, but it was now something that you can do to interact with GPT-3. And then just jumping a couple of years ahead, when in 2022, where ChatGPT came out. And 2022 is when you can then go ahead and actually start interacting with this thing on a website. You didn't need to have access to API. You didn't need to be tech savvy in any way. You just land on a website and you send a message to this thing and it starts responding to you. And this specific element right here where you can attach something to it, this was not available until later. So this is more of a recent screenshot of what it's like to actually interact with it. And it did not have access to the internet at the time either. It was closed. So it was just a very large language model that had access to a massive amount of data that it was trained on. But just you kind of get the idea here. You can actually message GPT, right? You could actually chat with it and do a lot of really crazy things. And this is when plagiarism became a big issue and a lot of students would just go here and be like, hey, type me in essay for etc. And it would start doing it, and then there were literally, now as we stand right now in 2025, there are certain signatures that are generated via the output from ChatGPT, where if you use that output, if you copy paste that output, the teachers who are grading you can actually tell whether or not that was created via an AI tool and you sat there and wrote the essay or the email or whatever it is, you know what I mean? So this was the key development in 2022. AI was now accessible to millions and probably billions of people, anybody who actually had access to the OpenAI websites that could go to chat.openai.com. So it was really, really cool. And it was disruptive, probably the most disruptive tech that happened since the inception of the internet. Because if you really think about it, before the internet was mainstream and everybody could access it, and then the world after the internet, drastically different. And then from that came, the initial Web 1.0, then we had Web 2.0, Web 3.0, all of that stuff. Social media was in that. So there was so much of a development, so much of a transformation that took place because of the internet. And it was massively disruptive. There were so many businesses that went out of business because of companies like Netflix and Amazon. So it was crazy. It was really, really crazy. There was a big shift in the world. And now there's another one, which is another massive, massive shift in the world, because now everybody has access to the GPTs and the Grok AIs and the Google Geminis of the world. And now you can even train them if you know how to interact with them, and you can train via API and just really crazy stuff that's taking place. And so it's really interesting to see or think about what would happen, 5 years from now. It's mind blowing to think about. So the impact in 2022 was that the creative AI applications were really now being mainstream, and a lot of people were able to get some really decent images to be generated, and of course a bunch of really cool responses to their prompts to be generated. And the world was never the same. After ChatGPT came out, the world was drastically different. In 2023, there were several events that took place that are of note, and they're very important. I would say probably the most important one was the European AI Act that was proposed. And this was something that was meant to regulate what was going on. I don't know how much it has actually helped. I don't know how much power this act has had, and actually kind of, you can say, put a threshold on the development of these tools or anything like that, because they are still developing them and they're still becoming even more powerful as I'm talking about this. So it was intended to provide regulations. I just don't know how well. Maybe the purpose of it was mostly to ensure safety and ethics and things like that will actually respect our basic rights as human beings, to not eliminate us as a necessity in the world, to still encourage development and progress without actually putting people at risk. I would say, I believe that was the key thing around it. And just doing a quick little Google search here, it says that the primary purpose of it was to reach this agreement to create a comprehensive legal framework for AI to ensure that it's developed and used safely, ethically, and in ways that respect fundamental rights for human beings. And it aims to foster trust in AI among European citizens while encouraging innovation. So the objectives were to establish trust, to promote safety and fundamental rights, to encourage responsible innovation, to strengthen the single market, and to set a global standard. So this was the first comprehensive regulation that came out in 2023 around AI. Then there was the development of Grok, Gemini, and other types of AIs like Claude, and so many different Meta's AI, and a variety of different companies started developing their own AI tools, and now they're almost everywhere. So it's just some of them are writing based on the API of these major tools. So there are applications that have been developed based on the API of GPT or Gemini or Grok, but there are several companies that develop their own internal AI. that is proprietary to them that you can use, and you would only get access to that specific tool. So the competition element of this was actually really good for us as consumers, because now, since they're competing with each other, we get a better product because these guys want to be the best in their world. So as a result, we would get a better product that we can use. But it also makes it so that they can hold each other accountable. Hopefully, relatively, they can hold each other accountable by the way that they do the business and the way that they set an example. So the goal here was to get safe, unbiased AI models. Number one, because if there's only one AI model, they can essentially train it on any type of information that they want, which means that they can actually limit the type of information that it gets, and it now becomes biased. Now it actually has opinions, for lack of a better word, and it doesn't give you just the facts, right? It can think, which is what the entire debate around this is that if it ever becomes sentient and it can think for itself, what would happen and what would happen to us as human beings. But as it stands right now, it's mainly just a really powerful tool that can ingest a massive amount of data and parse through that data and give you the best response to the prompt or the question that you're asking it. And so if it's fed everything, then it can give you the best type of response. If it only is fed a limited amount of information, then it can actually be biased in its response. So that's where the unbiased models were kind of generated, or not necessarily the unbiased models were generated, but they encouraged unbiased work, because if one model is more unbiased than another model, then people who are looking for quote unquote the truth or the best type of information, they would go to the one that is most unbiased. And then of course competition is a great thing, because as consumers we would just get really good tools and resources, because these guys want to beat each other, therefore they're going to create better versions of these tools more consistently. Between 2023 and 2024, a lot of really crazy things started happening, and it was things just around, being able to integrate text as well as images, as well as start attaching files and doing a lot of really crazy things. And then there was the integration into critical infrastructure that took place. So for example, when you can actually connect the API of these various tools into these various industries, you can now have empowered versions of these industries, where the healthcare, finance, cybersecurity, quantum AI industry, quantum AI became an industry as a result of all of this. And just all of this integration empowered these companies. Now, as a result, a lot of jobs were lost, right? As a result, people that had repetitive tasks that they really could just automate those things with a decent Python script or something, all of those people were replaced simply because AI can do your job better than you. It can do it without complaining. And apart from that initial cost to set it up, it really doesn't have the same cost that it would for us to pay human beings. And it's unfortunate to say, I understand how many people can be upset by this, but it's also just it's a part of the world. So you have to learn to adapt to it. So as a human being, you need to upskill yourself. You need to learn more advanced things instead of just doing repetitive tasks and kind of phoning it in and doing a job that can be done for minimum wage and stuff like that. So it's a very, very important time in human history for us to be able to make the adjustment and adapt to what's going on, because these tools are going to, for the most part, replace any type of repetitive task for sure, and then maybe some of the more advanced tasks as well, because they just have the ability to process information better than we do, and they have the bandwidth to actually do those things. So there is going to be a limit on the actual infrastructure itself, on the amount of compute that's available. So because we're limited on physical space and these warehouses can only get so big, they have to work on creating more microprocessors and chips that actually have more computing power to be able to make the most out of the space that they have in those warehouses to increase the computing power of these AI tools. But in 2024, which is just last year, there was a massive amount of integration into the infrastructure of economics in general, just the economy and these major industries that were really affected by it. The impact as it stands is that AI can defend against 2,200 plus daily attacks per day. That's redundant, daily attacks per day. But it can defend against thousands of daily attacks. And this is an IBM statistic because it can do the job of sifting and sorting through network logs much better than a human being can. If you give it the goal that it needs to do, it will go ahead and just ingest like thousands of events that take place in certain companies. There are thousands of events that take place within an hour, probably tens of thousands within an hour. And to expect a human being to be able to parse through all of that and to respond to it accordingly in a timely fashion before the hack takes place, all of these things are it's expected the AI will do better than a human being will. Ever since the AI beat the chess champion, this was the expectation. And of course, ever since Alan Turing, when he came out and said, hey, machines could actually do things like human beings or maybe even better than human beings, that's when there was a lot of this conversation. And we're just now there. Now we're there. It took 70 years, 75 years later is how long it took, but now we're actually there. So now as it stands in October of 2025, when I created the notes for this, the federated learning and quantum AI is beginning to mature. And this was the best image that I could really kind of come up with for a quantum computer. But if you actually go and look at images of the quantum computers themselves, you will see these just very advanced machines with, thousands of wires and cables and all of these things coming out of them. And I was trying to find the one image that has a side-by-side of the human brain and the visual resemblance of a quantum computer. And the way that a quantum computer looks, if you look at it with the right angle or if it's been kind of organized in the right way, it really does look like the human brain. So it's this giant human brain, right, that can now do insanely complex equations and very, very fast processing of those equations. There's something called the equation of the universe or something like that, where, if you were trying to use a regular computer to solve it, it would take it like hundreds, if not thousands of years. And now a quantum computer then can do it in a couple of hours. And it's really, really, really advanced computing. The issue is that it takes a lot of power. It takes a lot of physical material to do something like that. So the maturity of these quantum computers and to be able to shrink them in size to make them use less physical material and less energy would be the next level of computing. And of course, AI will just kind of adapt to that, and it will grow in power and its processing power as the physical infrastructure, as the physical compute starts advancing as well. So we are now in optimization and refinement when it comes down to these types of technologies, and privacy is now a really big deal, because if a quantum computer can break apart or decrypt the SHA-256 encryption, right? SHA-256 encryption is the standard encryption for web pages across the world right now, where the connection between you and YouTube is through a SHA-256 encryption, a certificate. And so it will go from SHA-256 to 512 to 1200 to 5000, and it will just keep going in its encryption standard, because quantum AI can very easily decrypt SHA-256 encryption. So this is where quantum encryption is going to come into play, and privacy will be a very big deal until it gets to the point that privacy is no longer even an issue because everybody's information is out into the world. That might be a thing, and then only a select group of people who have access to massive resources and money and things like that, they can still protect their privacy. But for the most part, everybody's privacy is no longer even going to be an issue, is not even a goal anymore, because everybody's privacy is out there. So the focus of privacy is going to become an interesting thing, where the training of these AI tools and the focus being private data. And if I interact with Grok, I don't want my information to go out into the world. I don't want Grok to just share my information with people, to share my musings with it. If I'm working on a project, I don't want it to give my project source code away. There's just so many things that are really, really important as we get further into the development of this technology. And of course, quantum AI itself being one of the key elements in this process, that the more companies that have access to quantum AI, the more secure those companies will be. But if it's a handful of companies that have access to quantum AI, that means that those companies have a superpower in their hands, and they can technically just decrypt all of the encryption of most of the world's companies, which is really crazy to think about. Competitively, it's like very crazy to think about, because they could just break into your database and they could steal everything that they need from you, because you could be using maximum encryption standards, but to a quantum computer, it's nothing. To a quantum computer, it's just 5 minutes of work. So it's very, very interesting what's going to be happening, which is what I'm saying. It's like by 2030, I don't even know what would happen in 2030. So the impact of what's going on with quantum computing, quantum AI, the federated learning, privacy focus, all of that stuff, is that security should be a big deal. Collaborative AI without data sharing should be a very, very big deal. Because again, I don't want you to share my ideas with the rest of the world. You're supposed to help me develop my idea. You're not supposed to disclose my idea to anybody else. And you should be keeping my source code private. You should not be sharing my source code with anybody else. There's just a lot of really crazy things that you don't think about being an issue until it is an issue, and now you're like, okay, well, we need to solve for this. So AI, as you saw in the last few minutes, I don't know how long I've been recording, probably for maybe 40 minutes or something like that. In a short 40-minute time, we just went through the history of AI since its very inception of a thought in 1950 by Alan Turing to where we are right now with quantum AI and the quantum mechanics of it, and what is going to happen in just a few years, or maybe even next year. So what is going to happen in 2026? What will AI actually look like in 2026? What would the world look like in 2026? And then if we went further, what would it look like in 2027 and 28 and 29 and 30 and the few decades in the future? And it's just really, really mind-boggling to think about. So I'm actually very curious to hear what you think would happen in 2026, right? Don't go too crazy into the future by 2040 or 50. I'm curious what you think is going to happen in 2026. What do you think is around the corner for us when it comes down to quantum computing, quantum AI in general, and how it's going to impact our lives as human beings? Because that's what it really all comes down to. It's great to have this technology, but how is it going to impact our lives as human beings? So I'm looking forward to reading your comments. I don't know if you can hear my dog sneezing in the background. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your comments. Very much looking forward to seeing what the development of AI is going to be and how it's all going to impact cybersecurity, how it's going to impact our lives as human beings and our lifestyles and the value that we can deliver to the world. So it's going to be an interesting few years and few months, and I'm here for it. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. So there's that. That was our history of AI from 1950 to currently 2025 and probably 2026. And it's just going to advance faster and faster, as I'm sure you already know. Look forward to hearing from you. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers. If you have not done so already, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out. And of course, check out the AI for Cybersecurity playlist, because this video is a part of that playlist, and Hackaholics Anonymous members get access to exclusive content. You'll get all of that in just a few seconds here. But make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Become a part of the community. It's going to be fun. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers. If you're a network and system attacker/protector, I will talk to you soon. Peace. If you want access to my notes and exclusive downloads and to get lifetime access to me on Discord, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous. We have 4 tiers. We have the supporter, the agent, the guardian, and the Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. The Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below and you will be able to choose the tier for which you want to join. I really hope I see you in the Discord chats. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section.